Hello. Today we will be discussing chapter 4 of the evolution of our part. Chapter 4 is regarding Tsarist and Soviet operational lot from 1853 to 1991. The chapter is divided into 10 parts that includes the introduction and the conclusion. What I'll do is in this video, I'll try to give you the summary of each of these parts so that you have a better comprehension.
When you start reading the book, the chapters, the parts of the chapter are as shown on this slide. Operational art in Russia emerged in the response to the military challenges and social crises. Key periods such as the aftermath of the Crimean War and Russo-Japanese War revealed the weaknesses of the Tsarist system. And this prompted reforms to modernize the military. Defeats underscored the need for better strategies, advanced weaponry, and structural reforms. The Russian Revolution and the subsequent civil war further shaped the Soviet military doctrines, embedding operational art into Red Army's strategic framework. So the first part is Svechin's strategy and the origin of the operational art. Alexander A. Svechin, a pivotal military theorist, revolutionized modern military thinking by introducing the concept of operational art. His idea bridged the gap between the tactics, immediate battlefield maneuvers, and the strategy, the long term goal set by the political leaders. Swechin's theories emerged from his experiences during the World War I and his role in Bolshevik military system post 1917, making him a key architect of the Soviet military doctrine. His key contribution: firstly, he defined operational art as the critical link that transforms tactical victories into cohesive campaigns, achieving broader strategic objectives. He drew inspiration from Hans Delbrück. He proposed two approaches to warfare: attrition, a slow, deliberate strategy of wearing down an enemy, and annihilation, which focused on the swift, decisive battles. Now, which one to be adopted depended on the political aim, economic resources, and nature of the conflict. He also argued that military strategy must align with political leadership and the societal realities, emphasizing that even the most skilled operational planning cannot compensate for poor strategic decisions. Sweshen cautioned against reliance on the ideological enthusiasm, predicting that future wars would and center on the conflicts between the nation states rather than the revolutionary struggles. Sweshen's theories became fundamental to Soviet military doctrines during 1920s, influencing the debates on lessons from the World War I and the Russian Civil War. His work remained a cornerstone of the modern operational art, linking tactical actions to strategic objectives and shaping the evolution of the warfare. Next part is on Tukhachevsky about the mechanization, deep operations, and the Battle of Annihilation. Michael Tukhachevsky, a visionary Soviet military leader, redefined modern warfare by championing mechanization, deep operations, and the Battle of Annihilation. His groundbreaking ideas reshaped Soviet military doctrine, fusing the advanced technology with innovative strategies to deliver decisive victories on the battlefield. Tukhachevsky's concept of deep operation involved breaking through enemy defenses with mechanized and airborne forces, followed by rapid exploitation to encircle and annihilate opposing armies. These operations relied on combined arms, employing tanks, artillery, and the aircraft across multiple echelons to maintain momentum and operational depth. Recognizing the potential of the technology, Tukhachevsky's emphasis was on the mass production and the integration of the modern weaponry, such as tank and the aircraft, as the backbone of the mechanized Red Army. He also pioneered the experimental airborne operations, including paratroopers to support deep offensive maneuvers. His contribution also extended to the drafting of field regulations and organizing large scale military exercises, which demonstrated the effectiveness of his theories. So, his vision included a massive mechanized force. Tukhachevsky proposed equipping the Red Army with 260 divisions, 50,000 tanks, and 40,000 aircraft, aligning his idea with the Soviet Union's broader industrialization goals. However, his vision faced challenges. Political resistance and Stalin's purges in the late 1930s led to his execution, stalling the development of his strategies. Despite these setbacks, Tukhachevsky's legacy endures. His integration of technology and operational innovation laid the foundation for modern mechanized warfare, influencing not only the Soviet military doctrine but also the global evolution of the op art. Next part is from the Great Purge to the Great Patriotic War. The period from Great Purge of the 1930s to the Great Patriotic War during the World War II was transformative and turbulent time for the Soviet military. Stalin's purges decimated the Red Army's leadership, undermining its preparedness for the German invasion in 1941. During the Great Purge, over 35,000 officers, including top commanders like Mikhail Tukhachevsky, were executed or imprisoned. This left a leadership vacuum with inexperienced officers promoted to the critical roles. The fear of political prosecution stifled the innovation and strategic thinking. Revolutionary doctrines like deep operations were sidelined, further weakening the Red Army's combat readiness. As a result, when the Operation Barbarossa happened in 1941, the Soviet Union was caught off guard. In the initial years, they suffered major losses, both in terms of the manpower and also the, the equipment. But the Red Army started adapting itself to these adversities and using its resources and geography was able to retain its effectiveness. Guided by Stalin and Stavka, The surviving officers and the new leadership leaders rose to the occasion, leveraging Soviet Union's vast resources and geography to mount a defense. Over time, the Red Army regained its footing, achieving critical victories Stalingrad and Kursk. This era underscores the resilience of the Soviet military despite devastating impact of the purges. Lessons learned from the Winter War, that is the Finnish War, we will be discussing it in the next part, and subsequent reforms laid the foundation of Soviet Union's eventual triumph in the Great Patriotic War. This part is on the strategy and operational art in the Soviet-Finnish War in 1939 to 1940. This happened in this area, Karelian Isthmus, which is bordering with the Finland. The Soviet-Finnish War exposed critical weakness of the Red Army's strategy and operational art, shaping Soviet military doctrine in the lead up to World War II. The Soviet Union aimed to secure its northwestern border by demanding territorial concessions from Finland, including the Karelian Isthmus. When negotiations failed, Stalin launched a military campaign expecting a quick victory. However, overconfidence and poor planning undermined the Soviet efforts. Rejecting cautious strategies proposed by the Marshal Spochnikov, Stalin ordered an aggressive attack with minimal preparations. Soviet forces spread their strength across multiple fronts, failing to concentrate attacks effectively. Poor intelligence, inadequate winter training, and an over reliance on the road bound mechanized units left them vulnerable to Finland's mobile ski troops. The Finnish defenses, particularly along the Mannerheim line, inflicted heavy Soviet losses. Uncoordinated attacks and the logistical struggles in the harsh winter condition further compounded the failures. Faced with the stalemates and the high casualties, Stalin replaced General Merezhkov with Simon Timoshenko in January 1940. Timoshenko, when he came, he adopted the Spashnikov's plan, which was recommended earlier, which Stalin had rejected, thus focusing on the concentrated assaults, combined arms coordination, and improved preparation. By February 1940, the Red Army breached the Mannerheim line with heavy artillery and coordinated infantry advances, forcing Finland to sign a ceasefire in the March of that year. The war exposed glaring flaws in Soviet command, training, and operational planning, while highlighting the dangers of political interference and impact of purges. Post-war reforms improved tactics and the combined arms integration and mechanized operations, laying the groundwork for Soviet success in the World War II. Although Soviet Union achieved its territorial goals, the Winter War remains a stark reminder of the cost of strategic overconfidence and inadequate preparation. Next part deals with the tale of two operations, that is Uranus and Mars. In the late 1940s, two major Soviet operations, Operation Uranus and Operation Mars, showcased both the triumphs and challenges of Soviet operational art during the World War II. While Uranus is celebrated as a decisive turning point at Stalingrad, Mars is remembered as a costly failure. We will see them one by one. Operation Uranus was launched on November 19, 1942, aimed at encircling and destroying the German Sixth Army near Stalingrad. So, for that, meticulous planning by General Zhukov and Veselski, the offensive targeted the weak flanks of the German forces, defended by the untrained Romanian units. Over a million Soviet troops, supported by 1,460 tanks and 15,300 artillery pieces, executed a dual pincer movement from the north and south. Within days, they encircled 290,000 Axis troops in Stalingrad. By February 1943, Soviet victory was complete with the surrender of Field Marshal Paulus, marking a decisive shift in the Eastern Front and demonstrating the Red Army's growing mastery of operational art. On the other hand, the Operation Mars, launched on November 25, 1942, aimed to eliminate the German Riz salient, which was west of the Moscow. Poor weather, strong German defenses under General Walter Model, and ineffective artillery preparation hampered the Soviet offensive. Despite determined assaults by the Klenin and the Western Front, the operational resulted in heavy Soviet losses and limited gains. German units were encircled and salient remained in the German hands till 1943. While Uranus highlighted the Red Army's ability to coordinate large-scale offensive and exploit enemy weakness, Mars underscored the difficulties of attacking entrenched positions. Together, these operations reflect the evolution of Soviet military strategy during the World War II, showcasing both its strength and limitations in the face of formidable adversaries. Kursk, the premeditated defensive operation. In the earlier slides, you must have seen the Kharkov, which was slightly north of the area in which the of Stalingrad. Uh, Now, this is the salient which was held by the Russians, and the Germans wanted to cut off this salient. So, in this, the battle was fought in July 1943, and it was a pivotal conflict on the Eastern Front during the World War II, showcasing the Soviet mastery of defensive operational art. Unlike the earlier battles, Kursk was a premeditated and meticulously prepared defense designed to counter the German offensive. The outcome decisively ended Germany's hope of regaining the strategic initiative on the Eastern Front. And this, the Hitler's objective in the Operation Citadel was to encircle and destroy the Soviet forces in Kursk salient to regain momentum after Stalingrad. So, anticipating this, the Soviet commanders Zhukov and Veselivsky fortified the Kursk region with extensive defenses, including minefields, anti-tank obstacles, and the artillery positions. The Soviets also amassed substantial reserves, including tank armies and the mechanized units, while maintaining air superiority. So the battle happened on July 5th, 1943. The Germans launched their offensive in the north. Model's Ninth Army was halted by the Soviet defenses, while in the south, Mainstein's 4th Panzer Army made limited progress, but was slowed by the fierce Soviet counterattacks, and the logistical issues. On July 12th, the Soviets launched Operation Kutuzov, forcing German forces to retreat from Orel. Orel I have shown you on the map. Simultaneously, the Battle of Prokharkovka, one of the largest tank battles in the history, halted the German advance in the south. Exhausted German forces were eventually overwhelmed by the fresh Soviet reserves. The battle inflicted severe losses on the German forces, marking the end of their offensive capabilities on the Eastern Front. Kursk demonstrated the effectiveness of premeditated defenses, strategic deception, and the coordinated counteroffensive. It was a turning point in the war, paving the way for Soviet advances into the Eastern Europe and cemented Red Army's growing operational sophistication. Overall, Kursk highlighted the shift in the balance of power on the Eastern Front. Next part is on Bagration and Lvov-Sandomierz operational art matured. The part Bagration and Lvov-Sandomierz, the operational art matured, examines two significant operations during the World War II, emphasizing the evolution of maturity of the Soviet operational art. The summary of both these operations is given below. Operation Bagration was codenamed for the 1944 Soviet Belarusian. The key themes in this were this operation aimed at destroying the German army group center. It highlighted the sophisticated Soviet operational planning, including deception, timing, and logistical coordination. The offensive success demonstrated effective integration of infantry, artillery, and armored units, leveraging the operational depth to circle and destroy German forces. On the other hand, the Lvov-Sandomierz offensive was a major Red Army operation to force the German troops from Ukraine and eastern Poland, and it was also launched in the mid-July 1944. The operation was successfully completed by the end of August. It was conducted concurrently with the Operation Bagration. It sought to clear the German forces from the western Ukraine and establish a foothold for future advances into the Central Europe. The operation reflected similar operational precisions with the emphasis on exploiting the breakthroughs and the maintaining the momentum. The impact and the lessons of these. The operations exemplified the Soviets' ability to synchronize large scale maneuvers and adapt to the dynamic battlefield conditions. They contributed significantly to the collapse of German resistance in the Eastern Front and paving the way for the Red Army's advance into Eastern Europe. Both operations are case studies in the successful application of operational art, thus illustrating its importance in the modern warfare. The Soviet approach set a precedent for post war military strategies and the operational planning. Next part is on the operational art from 1945 to 2003. In this part, it is explored that the evolution of operational art in the Soviet Union and Russia from the end of World War II in 1945 to the early 21st century. It highlights the impact of nuclear weapons, technological advancements, and shifting military doctrines on the operational planning and execution. It is further divided into subparts in the various periods. First is the post-war development. Soviet operational art, shaped during the Great Patriotic War, emphasized mass mobilization, multi-front campaigns, and deep operations. Post-war strategies sought to sustain the capabilities for large-scale conventional warfare. But then there was the impact of the nuclear weapons. The advent of the nuclear weapons redefined operational planning, prioritizing the dispersion, mobility, and the protection against the radiations. Early outcomes and the envisioned operations in the nuclear environment with conventional forces complementing strategic nuclear strikes. Next part is on the military and technical revolution from 1952 or 54, 1954 to 1985. So there was a shift in the nuclear centric warfare. Under Nikita Khrushchev, the Soviet Union embraced these nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles as a cornerstone of their national defense. Ground forces were reduced, and the operational art was adapted to focus on the early use of nuclear weapon. Emergence of the conventional focus. By 1970s, Soviet planners began emphasizing on the extended conventional operations, driven by the advancement in the precision guided munitions and the automated command systems. Operational maneuver groups were introduced to penetrate enemy defenses and disrupt the NATO forces at an operational level. Cold War escalation. With the escalation, the Soviets doctrines envisioned large scale offensive aimed at achieving deep penetration into NATO territories, often modeled on the successful deep operations of the World War II. But there were challenges. So there were challenges in 1980s. The technological and economic constraints. By 1990s, NATO's precision strike capabilities and advanced conventional weapons posed challenges to the Soviet mass-oriented strategies. Economic stagnation limited the Soviet Union's ability to modernize its armed forces. Operational art and strategic debate. Marshal Ogrikov championed a revolution in military affairs, advocating for professionalism, informationization, and advanced conventional capabilities. Resistance from the Soviet arms industry and the traditionalists curtailed Ogrikov's reforms, leaving Soviet operational art tied to the outdated mass industrial model. So, post Soviet evolution from 1991 to 2003, the collapse of the Soviet Union, the end of Cold War, and the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991 marked a shift in the Russian operational priorities. With the limited resources, Russia moved away from mass mobilization towards more agile regional operations. Lessons from modern conflicts. The failure in First Chechen War 1994 to 1996 highlighted deficiencies in the Russian operational planning and force readiness. The intervention in Georgia in 2008 and subsequent reforms aimed to modernize the military and integrate informationization and precision weapons. Then the shift in the strategic focus. Post 1999, exercises in Russia reflected a reliance on the nuclear first use doctrine to counterbalance NATO's conventional superiority. The Russian operational art remained influenced by the Soviet traditions, but adapted to address modern geopolitical and technological realities. So, the operational art from 1945 to 2003 reflects the transition from mass industrial war to modern technological driven conflict. While the Soviet Union initially relied on large scale mobilization and nuclear deterrence, the limitations of this approach became evident by the late Cold War. Post Soviet Russia began adapting the operational art to reflect new realities, focusing on the regional conflicts, advanced weaponry, and professionalism, though with mixed success. These developments highlighting the enduring influence of historical doctrine along with the challenges of the modernization. In the concluding part of this chapter, this part provides an overarching analysis of the operational art of Soviet Union, its evolution, its role in shaping the outcomes of conflicts from Russian Civil War to the end of Cold War. It reflects on the theoretical foundations, practical applications, and the decline in Soviet military doctrine, emphasizing its historical significance and enduring lessons. We'll go over these things, the theoretical foundations, the practical applications, one by one. So, this acts as a sort of revision of the whole chapter. The theoretical foundations. First is the Swechin's influence. Alexander Svechin emphasized on the strategy, operational art, and the integration of the political, economic, and military consideration. This laid the groundwork for Soviet military thought. His dual concepts of attrition, ismori, and annihilation, Sokurshin, framed the debate on how to approach the future wars. Then was the Tukhachevsky's contribution. Tukhachevsky advanced Svechin's theories with the deep operations, mechanized forces, and large-scale maneuvers aimed to deceive victory, aimed at decisive victories. His concepts influenced the Russian Red Army's success during the World War II, despite his execution during Stalin's purges. The practical application. World War II successes. Soviet operational art reached its zenith during the Great Patriotic War with campaigns like Stalingrad, Kursk, and Bagration, demonstrating the effective use of multiple front coordination, deep operations, and mass mobilization. These campaigns showcased the adaptability and learning capability of the Red Army under pressure. Post war limitations. After the World War II, the focus shifted to the nuclear and mechanized war after sidelining the traditional operational art. The growing reliance on nuclear deterrence and the failure to modernize conventional forces weakened the Soviet military's effectiveness in the later decades. Challenges and decline. Economic and technological constraints. The Soviet Union's inability to keep pace with the NATO's technological advancements and precision warfare highlighted the limitations of its mass-oriented tech doctrine, economic stagnation, and further restricted military modernization. Mismatch between doctrine and reality. The Soviet military's focus on preparing for large-scale industrial war clashed with the realities of the modern regional conflicts. Failure in Afghanistan and the First Chechen War underscored the need for a more flexible and professionalized military approach. The LEGAC, Learning Organization. The Red Army had the great ability to adapt during World War II and integrate lessons into subsequent operations, remaining a key achievement of the Soviet operational art. The emphasis on strategic foresight, multiple front coordination, and deep operations continues to influence the military thinking globally. Enduring lessons. The collapse of Soviet Union highlighted the dangers of over-reliance on outdated doctrines and the failure of the balanced military ambitions with economic realities. The study of Soviet operational art serves as both model of the innovation and the cautionary tale of the rigid institutional inertia. So overall, the Soviet operational art evolved into a sophisticated framework that guided the Red Army through some of history's largest and most complex campaigns. However, its decline underscores the importance of adapting military doctrines to technological, economic, and geopolitical realities. The legacy of Soviet operational art remains a critical area for study for understanding the modern warfare and the intersection of strategy, operation, and tactics. Thank you.